Hello, 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 everybody. I hope everyone is having a fantastic afternoon, morning, and evening, wherever you are in the world. I am here with a very special guest, a fantastic guest. I am here with Crypto Orange. Crypto Orange, how are you today, brother? How's
Doing
everything
good,
going?
buddy. Nice to see you, Corey. Appreciate it. And thanks for having me on.
Of
Looking
course, I'm
forward.
happy to have you on. I've seen you around the HEX and PulseChain community, you know, being extremely positive, being a good man, being a noble man, being a compassionate individual. And I think that'll be reflective based off of your profession. We'll talk about that.
Sure.
And I'm very grateful to have you on. And I'm very happy you're here. So I want to say thank you for choosing me out of all the streams to come on after a 2-year hiatus.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Great. Okay.
Absolutely.
Looking forward. Looking forward.
Cool. So I want to ask you. So I usually like to get to know my guests, like how do they get involved in this space? So
Mm.
how did you get into the cryptocurrency space, Orange? And what was the aha moment where you realized this space had a future, not only as an asset class, but as a actual financial instrument?
Mm. So I first learned about Bitcoin through a documentary. I'm sure a lot of people have watched it, The Deep Web with
Hmm.
Ross Albright. And I was back in 2015. So that's when I learned about Bitcoin. So I was fascinated and learning about Silk Road and so forth. Just the fact that this actually could happen. So I always liked firsts. I always like the kind of when something new and innovative comes, I kind of gravitate to it and try to learn a little bit more about it. Um, so I went to Coinbase. I actually went to Coinbase and opened an account, and Bitcoin was probably at about $750.
Wow.
Um, and I didn't quite understand it. Of course, I didn't know anybody. I didn't even know where to go to get information. So, I didn't know you can go to Reddit or anywhere else to even talk to people about it. And I was just saying to myself, well, what am I going to do with a digital currency? What can I possibly? And I thought you had to buy a whole Bitcoin. So that was the
Mhm.
thing too. I didn't have $800 lying around. I could just kind of willy nilly and just go buy some cryptocurrency. And so I kind of forgot about it until 2017 when the big run up to
Yep.
20K. And of course, it's plastered all over the news and so forth. So you really couldn't get away from it. And I'm kind of looking at it like, I remember that. I remember the documentary. I remember the Coinbase, and kind of everything was like, oh dear God, what the hell happened? I was like, I missed, I missed a $750 Bitcoin. So I I then really started looking into it and learning about it. Um, Two pivotal people that I learned about blockchain: Don Tascott and what's her name?
Okay, I remember him.
Um, she's out in Wyoming. Maybe somebody in the chat.
Was she a
Uh,
politician?
yeah, she's used to be
Cynthia
on Wall
Lemons?
Street. I'm sorry.
Was it Cynthia Lemons?
No. It's starts with a K.
Kathy
Um,
Wood? Oh no, that's C.
no, somebody in the chat might know it. At any rate, um, yeah, I was, especially with how Don Tasper had explained blockchain, just very eloquent and kind of it really understood. And I was like,
Mhm,
wow, this is like not only is a digital currency, but this is really the way we're going to interact with each other
mhm.
on many different levels. And so I went deep in. I jumped down that rabbit hole and haven't looked back. um, I started a meetup group in my town, and just so I could be with other people. And I had a few people at the beginning that showed up. And this was in real early days, so we didn't really, none of us really knew too much about it. And then many weeks I'd be there just kind of alone. So I I had a night picked out. I'd sit there, have a little dinner, you know. I was there for about I did it for 5 months. So I showed up very faithfully every week. I'd get on the meetup, and I had people join my meetup online, but then nobody would come. So it was one of those. So I kind of gave up on that. My first serious token was initially called Social Wallet, and then that morphed into Airwire, and that was back in the days. It was on actually the Pivx blockchain.
Pivx. I remember
Yeah,
Pivx.
remember
Yep.
you remember hearing Pivx? Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
have, of course.
we we were all involved. I bought into the ICO. We had so many coins, like 35,000, I think, just 35,000 tokens to get a masternode. Those masternodes were a little pricey. They were over $5,000 a piece. So so there was a small group of us. That's when I first got introduced to Discord. So that was a whole new thing. It was just beautiful community. And for about a year, we all worked on, getting our masternodes up and running. The first masternode that I actually created was like, I would say that was probably a real pivotal moment for me for crypto. It was just sense of accomplishment. I had to download this thick, like 20 plus 30, maybe 30 pages of instructions. And of course, we had each other to talk to, but everybody's from all over the world and all over the country. You ask a question, maybe we can get an answer for a little bit. And the majority of us were just kind of stumbling through this. There were maybe 2 or 3 people in the group that really understood this, thankfully. Just shout out to my buddy Marsh. Hopefully he'll see this someday. He was incredibly helpful. It took me about 8 hours to start that masternode. Back in the day, and people who are kind of IT savvy will remember Putty. I had to interact with this secondary. It was called Putty, and I wish I could explain to you what it was, but it was very foreign. And I'm a nurse, so I didn't have any IT background, so all of this was just completely new to me. But that sense of accomplishment, finally, when I got one going, I was like, okay, I can conquer it. And that was one of the things at that point in time, I had told myself, I said, you know what? I said, I want to touch every piece of this space. I want to experience it. And I knew it was risky. It was in a bear market, of course, the 2017. Yep. I knew nothing but down that whole first couple of years. And unfortunately, the token founders had made relationships with other tokens. And back in the day, that's what they did. What they would do is they would exchange tokens with each other instead of, that's how they traded value with each other. So of course, one of the partners had, as soon as it got listed on this, was an obscure exchange called System Coin. It got dumped. We worked for over a year. It was heartbreaking.
I can imagine.
We worked that long, then just to have in a flash that it just tanked, and it never recovered. And the project's still going. I'm still good friends with a handful of people from back in the day. Still have some Airwire tokens, and they are trying to rebrand. They were going to be an NFT marketplace, but I think they're looking at doing something a little different. So I guess that leads me to HEX.
Yeah. So I want to ask you. I just want to have some commentary about that before I ask you about HEX.
Yeah. Sorry.
And No, don't
Yeah.
apologize at all. No, I appreciate your willingness to be able to explain your story. And I just want to say before I add some commentary, I can't thank you enough, Lance Parker, for the $500 super chat. That was very, very kind of you. That was a very
Beautiful.
generous gift. I can't
Nice.
thank you enough, Lance. I hope you're doing well. God bless you, buddy. Thank you so much for that gift. I really can't thank you enough, man. Um, so when I realized is that, and this is why I wanted to ask, this is why I wanted to have you on, because I knew that you were a community person. I knew based on your background that you cared about human beings, you cared about community, you cared about compassion. And the reason why that it doesn't surprise me that you even hosted a meetup in your hometown, because you understand the main focus on why community is so valuable, and
Mhm.
that without a community, you don't have a product, you don't have a project, you don't have a company.
Mhm.
And that is so important. And trust me, I empathize going into cryptocurrency at that time and then forgetting about it and then watching the it skyrocket. I completely understand. I empathize also with I actually was involved. I bought a few, unfortunately, scams in 2017. Frank Rafrano in the chat would know. Exchange End was one of them.
Mhm.
We bought that's the only one I can really remember off the top of my head, Exchange End, and we found that it was a scam 4 hours after we got in. So yeah, it was annoying, it was horrible, but we learned from it. But that's a very amazing story, and I love how you turn your setbacks into comebacks with this scam. So I want to say that takes a lot of fortitude, and it takes a lot of drive to stay in an industry after something like that has happened to you.
Mhm.
A- And so I want to ask you, Orange. Um, Now I want to pivot towards Hex. Tell us about your journey into Hex, and how did it happen, and when? Out of all the cryptos in existence,
Mm.
why Hex and PulseChain?
Okay, so I was in a trading group, so I used to trade, and the so I was in Market Cipher with CryptoFace in that group. So I was into leverage trading, which I completely sucked at. But again, it was another community, and it was another connection. I didn't know much more other than doing masternodes, doing some trading. Um, just really wasn't aware, and you kind of get stuck in
Mhm.
something. Um, and so I'm in the trading chat, and somebody posts this hex coin just shot up, like out of nowhere. Um, no, wait a minute. I'm sorry.
Okay.
No, it hadn't launched. That's right. It hadn't launched. I'm sorry. Somebody had mentioned it in the chat, and they mentioned Richard Hart, and then all of a sudden you see this scam, or all the negative things that unfortunately sometimes have to deal with.
Hmm.
um, and I immediately said, well, I want to find out about this because I have to find out what's going on with this. So I was there right before the launch, um, and I can't remember if I just don't remember. The reason why I can't remember when I first bought Hex is because I bought it off McAfee's Dex.
McAfee's Dex.
Remember
Wow.
McAfee's Dex?
Takes me back. Yes, I
So
do remember. I
and
don't remember the name, but yes.
here's how I got connected there. So I was in a Ponzi called arbitrage.io, and John McAfee developed a relationship with the person who launched that. They were
Mhm.
going to have a credit card and so on and so forth. And then we were all there when he launched his Dex. And that was the only place I knew where Hex was sold. And so I think I bought like $7 worth, and I just kept it on the exchange. And I think it was when was the first, there was a run up early. Um, at any rate, my $7 turned into what? $30 or whatever.
Wow, that's a pretty good
I went
return for
I
seven
went
bucks.
to I went to the site to look at the staking. I couldn't make heads or tails of it. And people talking about, you could stake 15 years, and I was like, why would I want to stake it for 15 years? It was all just foreign to me.
Of
just kind
course.
of crazy foreign. I wasn't a part at the very beginning. I wasn't in the Telegram group. I didn't watch Richard Hart's streams, unfortunately, prior to the launch. Otherwise, maybe I would have gotten in a little sooner. I watched one stream that Richard was on, and it was, God, it was this whale. What is it? What were they called? At any rate, they were just awful. And Richard was just his awesome self, holding his own, trying to
Hmm.
explain to these nimrods exactly what the hell is going on in this, not only about hex in this space. And they were just so, they were like teenagers, they
Yep.
were just stupid, just kind of. And I said, I like that guy. I'm gonna watch some more streams. So I started following him. And then when he talked about trading, and I was still trading at the time, that's when it kind of clicked. When he talked, and we've all kind of heard this about having one person on one side and one person on the other side,
Yep.
and you're both trying to take something away from the other person,
Mhm.
and who's in the middle actually making out. And that just rung true, because for me, trading was like one step ahead, two steps behind.
Of course.
That was my experience with it. It was crazy. And then you're in this group, and then every once in a while, you know, you hear this wonderful success, and you're like, oh, maybe next time I can do it. It's like gambling, basically. It's like, the next time I go into the casino, I know I just lost a bunch of shitload of money, but next time I'm going to go get it back and more. And of course, that doesn't happen. So I came into the Telegram group kind of spilling my, it was like that moment. You know what I mean? I came into the Telegram group. I said, I used to be a trader. I'm not going to trade anymore. Whatever. I had this, it was a long text. I wish I could find it. I'm sure it's there someplace. And then Richard responded to me on Twitter. He actually asked me if he could repost what I had just put in Telegram, and of course I said yes, please. And so that was my introduction. So I was like a converted trader, and I was like one of I'm sure that's like, I'm sure that makes Richard feels good that when something like that happens, and it happened for me. So
Hmm.
I'm very grateful to Richard for that. Um, and then of course you get pulled into the community,
Of course.
and that was, I net I had come from the Airwire community. It was small. This was so different. It was bigger. It was more dynamic. Uh, the people in the group, the just the smarts. It blew me away. And then of course you get on Hexa was just doing his live streams there at the beginning, and he was like incredibly infectious. Um, you couldn't help but love the guy and just want to just join in. And so I early on I followed him right from YouTube, then over to D Live, and um, I don't know where else he went after that, but wherever he went.
Okay.
But those were, I mean, that beginning was so exciting, so special, and it was it was a much smaller group back then. Of course, I mean, you're in the chat and you start recognizing people and names and so forth, and then you see them over on Twitter, and they're all talking. We're talking to each other and so on and so forth. So um, it was just very welcoming, and you know, um, and once I got hooked as far as staking, it was pretty much, I was in it. I said, you know what, this is it. This is my horse. I'm I'm going to concentrate on this. So early on, I think in February, late February, I started in earnest with my stake and ladder. I did one for myself, my girlfriend, did a small one for my son.
Cool.
And it took a good while. I understood the importance of I didn't understand T-shares, but I understood that that's really what you want to aspire to, and the sooner you get them, the better. That was all I needed to know. So I of course did my ladders, did my 15 years, and then came back. And unfortunately, I had finished mine, and then I was halfway through my girlfriend's staking ladder, and the gas fee shot up.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't. I was doing monthly, and I was halfway through. I was at her. Oh, so it would have been halfway through, like the 7th or 8th year, and I was like, I can't do monthlies on hers. She didn't have a lot to put in it at the beginning and too, and she wasn't into crypto, so she kind of went along with me. So unfortunately, we couldn't continue that, but yeah, that was a lot of fun. I mean,
I'm sure.
it was awesome.
No, and that's an amazing story. I love when I hear about how individuals get into hex and their story thereof behind that, and the history, and to realize when people notice that trading sometimes can be very detrimental, and I like how you were able to say, here's my story with trading. I learned this from RH, and maybe another way of doing things would be more profitable and a less stressful economic venture, to say the least. I can only imagine trading in the most volatile asset class on the planet to ever exist is not an easy feat. So I commend you for that, because I've done it before, like 4 times in my entire crypto history, and I got in 2017. I was rarely successful in those 3 times. By the way, do you hear the lawnmowers outside or no? Just want to make sure. No? Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So I, I like how I love when I listen to community members that have been involved in Hex before Hex actually blew up, because I feel like they learned a lot about Richard Hart and who he is, instead of who the outrage marketing we see now. And it's very refreshing to learn about who he was as what hasn't changed, obviously, but who he was to the individuals that joined Hex, which was to my knowledge, a very small community at the time.
Right.
So it's a very refreshing, very refreshing mind perspective. So I want to ask you this, because you have a background in community compassion, you have a background in helping people, and you have a very commendable profession that is not an easy thing to do at all. So I have to say, I am very, 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 very commendable. I commend you for what you do, because this profession, if you guys don't know who Crypto Orange is, I'm going to explain his profession in a second. I commend you for what you do. It is not easy. So you are a nurse that works in hospice care. I can only imagine how difficult that can be sometimes. How does your compassion for those in hospice roll over to the compassion you have for the Hex community?
That's a good question.
Thank you. I try to ask good questions.
Yeah. Well, I've done hospice for over 35 years. It's very intense.
I can imagine.
It's kind of one of those, if you're going to do it for the long haul, you have to really understand that you need to have balance in your life. You have to be able to leave it at 5 o'clock. You have to know that the nurses who are taking over for you at the end, of your shift, your day, that they're going to have the same compassion and care for, your patients that you do.
Of course.
But dealing with, doing that particular work is you just have to be on. You're always on. You're in, you kind of, in intense kind of moment. That's a big, an important and big time in people's lives and families' lives. And, often they're not expecting it.
Of
It kind
course.
of hits them. Now I have to deal with it. And what are we going to do? How do we go about this? And how do we get prepared? And that's where hospice comes in.
Mhm.
Um, so I guess that's just kind of part and parcel. So I feel pretty in tune with people, and I think I can read them pretty quickly, only because I've had to. I didn't have a lot of time to develop relationships. To be eligible for hospice, of course, you got to have a prognosis of 6 months or less. But um, often we would get them um, much later than that. Sometimes they were just weeks, days. Um, so we didn't have you don't have time to get to know them and so
Of
on and so
course.
forth. You got to really kind of size up a situation pretty quick. You got to find the point person in the family and just get to it, because there's a lot that has to get pulled together, especially if somebody's going to be home. And that's
Of course.
that's mainly where I practice. I did hospice home care.
That's
So I think naturally, probably, uh, that just spills over to how I feel about people and community. Um, it- I get I get very connected with people. You know what I mean? And, and that's why, I feel very at home on Twitter. I like being on there. I'm there daily, and getting to know people. I love kidding around. We got some people with great sense of humor.
There
So
you go.
I love the banter, and I love I just love being a part of it. And it's nice to be help somebody. If somebody new comes in, say hello,
Mhm.
welcome them, answer questions, whatever you need to do to be supportive and so forth. Um, so
Exactly.
yeah, I mean, I guess it's just a natural extension of who I am, I guess.
Exactly. And that was a fantastic answer. And the reason why when I saw your picture, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. And when I saw your Twitter picture, it embodied, in my opinion, what it means for someone to be compassionate, to someone who's very well acquainted with having to comfort people. I can't explain it, but the way that your picture composes you as a human being is, if there's one word that I can highlight what that is compassion. And you're very approachable, you're very kind on Twitter, and that's why I used your picture on the thumbnail, because it's a very it's a very approachable picture. It's not There's no sense of bravado, there's no sense of intimidation by any means, or sense of personal trepidation from interaction. You are someone who embodies the principles of what needs to occur in blockchain communities, especially during a bear market, because there's so many disagree. When I say disagreements, I use that term lightly. It's
Sure.
mostly animosity,
Hmm.
and being in hospice care, home hospice care for 35 years, I can only imagine how difficult that can be. That has to be one of the most difficult professions, at least in my opinion, um, to do, because you're dealing with the prospect of individuals leaving this world. You have to understand how to be compassionate to them. You have to understand how to be compassionate to their family, to strangers you don't even know. And I feel like that's reflective in who you are with the HEX community, because let's face it, we're basically all strangers on the computer, and you have to be able to develop that compassion that exists now
Hmm.
and then and after, because we're basically all strangers, but that doesn't have to nullify the importance of compassion.
Right.
And I want to ask you then, there has been numerous disagreements in this community since the bear market went into full swing.
Mm.
With your notions of compassion, given your profession, what are some tips where we can be more passionate and understanding towards each other in this community?
Right. Well, this community's gotten much bigger. When Richard announced Pulse, having the need to do that, and thank God he did. It really, it kind of opened up things, and I kind of saw it happening when just being on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
You would go a week or two and maybe get a follow.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden it's like all these people, and I've said, well, this is getting really, really big. So I think once I had grown out of that initial initial community, then of course it opens up to a lot of different, you get exposed to a lot of different views, different people coming from completely different background about, as far as cryptocurrency.
Mm-hmm.
So and I think people are finally coming around. Initially when there was anything mentioned other than HEX, of course there was the like big knee-jerk reaction. It was
Of course.
And I feel that finally people are kind of wrapping their head around realizing that, we are going to have people coming from different places. And I think we need to be, very cognizant of that, and realize that, that they may not look at things like we do. You know what I mean? That HEX is a your own, everybody's journey in HEX is a little different. You know what I mean? It's, as far as learning about it's not buying Bitcoin and Ethereum, putting it in a Trezor and just forgetting about it.
Right.
It's very nuanced. It's very dynamic. There's a lot to it, as far as staking and everything that's involved. So it's a big learning curve. And so I think it's important. That's why I think it's really important when new people come in, that and I think for the most part, when I see a new person come in, I'm happy to see they are very welcomed.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they are.
Yeah. And that really, that goes to the heart of a great community. And so I think if we realize that, you know what I mean, that's going to be important. I think this bear market's probably, hasn't been the best for us, because it's hard to go through. I the one in 2017, I had experienced one, so I know what this looks like. But for some people, this is their first one. It can be a little disheartening. People who bought in at near 50 cents and they just got beaten down. And here, and then you start reading all these positive and so forth. You kind of get like, oh, well, it's not so bright from my perspective.
Of course.
But I think Pulse is going to certainly change that. And I think if there's any splintering or fracturing within the community, I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised when Pulse launches, how things are going to be kind of pulled back together. And I truly believe that. So
as do I.
I would not fret over it, worry about it. I think anybody who comes into the HEX ecosystem is called to it. they're going to do fine. There's a lot of support. Look at all the streamers. Look at all the information.
Yeah,
Dear God, I mean, you could. Nobody in the space is experiencing a bear market like us, and that is quite fascinating if you think about it. Think of all the things that we get to talk about and keep ourselves busy with the Maxi token, Hedron, things that are really kind of complementing HEX. In just them. I mean, it's just been amazing to be part of this during this time, and certainly when Pulse launches, it's going to be just crazy wild. I don't think people quite understand the magnitude. I think that they're going to be pleasantly surprised. Surprised how incredible opportunity this is. Even if you didn't sacrifice,
absolutely.
You're still crazy early.
I agree.
Yeah, definitely.
No, I agree with you 100%, and I think a lot of this animosity comes towards just first of all, people not realizing, people this being their first bear market, being disgruntled that their portfolio is down. I also think it's an amalgamation of that and PulseChain not launching yet, but I do believe that once this market starts turning around, you're going to start seeing the emotions turn, because these emotions are reflective of the macro emotional conditions of cryptocurrency right now. If you look around, this is a universality, and I'm saying that rhetorically, but if you look around in every cryptocurrency, it's a universality where people are angry, people are disgruntled, people are combative, because it adheres to our survival instincts, where we jump to this attack mode because we're backed against the corner. Our finances are basically synonymous with our survival. So this is very reflective of the macro crypto conditions that be. But I do agree with you that the community is very welcoming, and the reason, not even from actually from anecdotal testimony, my recent job that I just joined, two team members of Syscoin actually bought HEX. One of my close friends did, and he got over 400 likes after he highlighted that he bought HEX. So it was it's a very welcoming community. It's a very passionate community. There's no question about that.
Right.
And on that topic, then, it's a kind of a paradox here. It's kind of it's very strange how a community that's so welcoming is also so misunderstood. So,
Right.
Orange, why do you think the HEX community is so misunderstood from the broader crypto sphere? Are we too combative with other communities? And is it more important to extend an olive branch rather than succumb to combative dissonance?
Yeah. So, why are we kind of misunderstood? That's a good question.
Because I still don't know.
Yeah. So, God, that. Let me see if I could put this in perspective. I think because it's not like just any other. Let's take XRP for example. It's basically you hold on to the token,
Yep.
and hope for some price appreciation and so forth. But there's so much more to HEX, and I think a lot of times people are a little, they're hesitant because for whatever reason, it's like it's not an easy, they actually have to do some research. You have to go and get information.
Yep.
I've been trying to onboard people, particularly people who have never heard of cryptocurrency. Now, I tell you, that's a feat. That's getting them to even understand what this is all about. And I know things will get easier and so forth. So I think some of that, you know what I mean? That like, oh, those people over in HEX, they're just staking. It's easy to low hanging fruit to kind of just say, dismiss it and like, they're never going to be able to cash out. They're never going to be able to do this, do that. Johnny Chaos had a beautiful little snippet where he kind of went through all the kind of bullet points. He goes, under 2 minutes, I'm going to go through why the same recurring themes that we have to continue to hammer about. And I think we will too, because as more people come in, you're still going to get that same, I don't think it'll ever go away completely. I have noticed, though, it is very different than from the beginning. I hear less Ponzi scam talk
Same here.
than I did at the beginning when I started Hex Twitter. So that's gotten better. It'll get better over time, but you'll always have this, if you don't want to understand something, you just dismiss it, and then it's off your plate. You don't have to worry about it. It's gone. But there will come a moment in time where there'll be the reckoning, and people who previously had dismissed it are going to have to pay attention to it, because it'll just be, it'll be too big at that point. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
it answers it perfectly.
It's hard to, it's hard to say why this community kind of
it answers it perfectly,
misunderstood. This and also with Richard too. I mean, there's a lot of people who still have that. They see him, comes off sometimes arrogant, a little brash, and so forth. But he's absolutely softened up. If you saw him early on, he certainly is kind of moved away from that. But yeah, I mean, and unless it's the same thing. If you don't go that step further, you know what I mean. You can't just watch one video and say, well, I can't deal with the guy. Just you need to really go that step further. There's nobody in this, I feel, in this space that has such a depth of knowledge of really the entire space. I'm very fascinated. I sometimes will go back and watch some of Richard's early streams and talking about Bitcoin, and the history and his experience with Bitcoin and the community and so forth is really fascinating. I love the history of crypto, and I love that. I was actually not at the beginning, but boy, I was kind of early. I heard about it kind of early, 4 years after it was invented. So I love hearing that that piece. I kind of eat that stuff up. So sorry to get off on a tangent there.
No, you didn't go on a tangent at all. This is your interview, man. I don't care if you talk about butterflies and ponies. Don't worry about it, man. I appreciate it. Don't worry. I am very grateful of what you're saying, and I'm very grateful of your perspective. So you don't have to apologize, brother. So I do want to ask you this, however, and I think that you would have a very, very sobering perspective on this, and a very, very honest perspective, as because you understand community, you understand what it means to be compassionate, you understand it based off your profession and your personality, and you can understand strength and weakness in someone's character. So that begs me to ask the question to you, is what do you believe is the biggest strength of the Hex community and its biggest weakness, and why do you think this?
I think the community, and I agree with Richard, and Richard said this on a number of occasions, the community is really what sets Hex apart from the rest of crypto.
Agreed.
And I don't think, and the other part too is Richard himself. I mean, that combination. We get Richard, we understand him. Now, so if somebody new, okay, may not quite get him at the beginning, and that's like I said before. You kind of have to, you got to warm up to Richard, to get to that point. But once you're there, you know, um, my God, I mean, just makes so much sense, and it
Yep.
has, like I said, so much depth of knowledge and so forth. And so now on the other side, the weaknesses, is that what you're
Yes. Hmm.
yeah, well, I think like any community, you kind of get into a bit of a bubble. And particularly with Pulse, now everything, of course, is going to be brought over. So think about all the different communities that are going to be brought over.
Hmm.
So that I think is one thing that we all, I think, have to really be aware of. That there are going to be real new people coming on.
Hmm.
They're gonna have their PRC-20s, and they are going to start looking at us, and they're going to start looking at some of these early projects
Hmm.
um, that we're sacrificing for, or actually actively involved in, and so forth. And so that's the one thing I think, if there was any weakness, is that we can kind of get insulated, and that happens with any community. You get tribalistic.
Of course.
It's just kind of a natural. It's a natural behavior. It's in us. It's part of us. That's that's how we were designed. It's
Amen to that.
yeah. So, but we'll be good. I have faith. I have faith.
I agree.
Yeah, I have complete faith. Yeah.
I agree. I just think, and I agree with you about the strength. The strength is the community. I'm gonna botch this Latin phrase so badly, but I think it's veris and numeris, which means strength in numbers.
Mhm.
And then you have, yeah, you have that tribalistic instinct, and I completely understand that's just part of the human animal. It's just part of the human condition
Mhm.
to be
Sure.
protective of family. So I completely understand that.
Mhm.
And now I want to
Mhm.
ask you my last question before, if anybody just has any questions after I finish this last question. And yeah, so your bio says minimalist. In this world, why is it important to look at things from an appreciative perspective rather than a more avaristic and greedy one?
Um, well, I guess you can call me an aspiring minimalist. I'm not quite there. I've heard about people who are like really true minimalists. They only have one plate, one fork, one knife, and so forth. So when I think of a true minimalist, that's the kind of person I think of, like having the bare minimum. Well, I'm 61, and so I'm at the age now that I'm trying to get rid of stuff. In fact, that's what I'm going to do half my weekend. I promised myself I was just going to start unloading stuff and get rid of stuff that I've had for 30, 40 plus, you know what I mean? Um, so there's nothing that I need as far as, you know, um, items, you know what I mean? So there's nothing that kind of thrills me, you know?
Same here.
Yeah. So I'm, I come from that. And what was the other part of your question? I
Oh,
apologize.
sure, sure. No, don't apologize. It's okay. Um, so why is it important to look at things from an appreciative perspective rather than more of a, I guess you could say, a greed and avaristic intent?
Um, I think it feels better.
Yes, it does.
Quite simply. I mean, it's good to appreciate what you have. And I think anybody at any level can appreciate things that they have in their life, regardless of where they are, what
Mhm.
socio stratum they're in. We all could be thankful. You got to be thankful every time you wake up.
Exactly.
The fact that you can get up, you can get out, or you could work, you could talk. Um, Things could change in a minute, things can change in a minute. When prior to me getting into hospice, I actually did what we call high-tech peds. So I actually took care of a couple young children who were near drown victims.
Mm.
And that, if you, once you see that and experience, and as far as being a part of that, it really, and that was early in my nursing career. I was probably in my early 20s. And that kind of just said it for me. I was like, you know what? Whatever happens in my life, it pales. It pales in comparison to what these poor boys have to go through.
Of course.
And their families, right? So things weren't, there was never anything so devastating or I never felt like there could be anything that could happen in my life that would trip me up or
I can imagine.
not make me feel, like feel sorry for myself or whatever. I feel very grateful because I saw, how somebody's life can completely change.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's important. We all should be grateful. We should be grateful we're together and we're here. We're all together on this journey. That you found HEX.
Mm-hmm.
You took the time and you watched Richard's videos and something clicked. Something happened. I do believe that we're all here together for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
I do. I truly do. We could talk about that on another stream, but at any, so, but I do, and that's why I feel very connected. I feel like there's something bigger, much bigger than the contract, much bigger than all of us, and even Richard. There's something that's been. This is something special. This is something really, really special. And I'm thankful. I'm crazy thankful to be here.
And I want to say, what an incredible conclusion. I mean, I have to say that's a very heartfelt conclusion to this stream because, it's filled. The words that you convey are filled with this notion of passion and notion of caring and understanding that this community is bigger than just a contract or a staking ladder or I dare say RH himself. And that's why I wanted to have you on because I knew you knew the importance of community building, the focus of compassion, the focus of agreement over disagreement. And I want to say, you sure you're not a natural at this? You said this is your first stream. Are you sure? Because you did it really. I really enjoyed this conversation. I really did, and
I think you.
And I'm very grateful to have you on, Orange. And I really hope that this story goes out to people because it's all about empathy. It's all about understanding, each other, especially during the bear market right now. It ain't easy. So I want to say, Orange, I can't thank you enough for coming on today and really coming on the channel and speaking your story because I think it'll really help a lot of people. So I want to say thank you for your time.
Thank you, Corey, and thank you for having me. I really thank you for reaching out and yeah, let's all go, guys.
Absolutely.
And gals, of course. So
yes,
let's do it. Let's do it.
I want to say, guys, all I want to say before we end the stream is please consider following Crypto Orange on Twitter. I have his Twitter thread in the description. Please consider following me on Twitter. I also have mine on the description. I also want to ask if you guys could please like this video, share it, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I do these podcasts as much as I can. So if you guys could do that, please do, and I really appreciate it. I want to say thank you for everyone who came in. I also want to thank Lance again for the very generous $500 super chat. That really does help the channel. So thank you so much. And I want to say, most importantly, thank you so much, Crypto Orange, for your time.
Thank you, Corey. Appreciate
Absolutely.
it. Peace out.
Absolutely.